Dear friends, some years ago I had the good fortune of meeting Talyllyn for a second time. I had already visited his railway and had taken a ride behind both him and Dolgok. I was pleasantly surprised to meet him for a second time at a model railway exhibition over in Guildford, Surrey, and enjoyed the opportunity to see him again, even if he was lamentably on static display pending an overhaul. I met Skarloey some time ago too, and he was kind enough to tell me all about his memories from the early days of his little railway. Not all of them were featured in the Thin Clergyman's books, however, yet some of the characters he and Rheneas encountered during their lifetimes were so colourful and vibrant that I decided to set the record straight. Oh, and I think you may like to know that the Talyllyn Railway celebrates the 70th anniversary of its preservation this year. Talyllyn is under overhaul at the moment, but you can still go and see him and his friends on their little railway. When you do, be sure to wish him dry rails and good running from Skarloey, his little old twin. The author. The Anniversary Engine. Written and read by TARDIS 9. Based on the Railway series by the Reverend Wilbert Awdry and Thomas the Tank Engine and Friends by Britt Allcroft and David Mitten. Jumping Sheep. Skarloey looked all around him. The town hall at Crovansgate was bustling with activity. Everywhere about him, people had put up stands with model railways on them. Some were large enough for people to ride on them, had they been put outside. Others were no bigger than the nails on a hand. All around him, people of all ages jostled for position, either taking pictures of him or of the model trains. Next to him sat Neil, one of the 3 original Sodor and mainland engines. Skarloey had been pleased to see his old friend again. "Do you know," he said one night when the visitors had gone, "sometimes it seems like it was only yesterday when you helped me off that boat." "Aye," agreed Neil. "I remember it well. You didn't much like dangling around on them derricks like a sack of potatoes." The 2 friends laughed like anything. One day, Skarloey was looking around the room as usual, admiring the different layouts, when he saw a young blonde-haired man with blue eyes walking up to him, holding a camera. This man was about 24 years old, though he looked much older, going by his height and beard. "Excuse me," he said, "but are you Skarloey?" "Yes, I am," Skarloey replied. "Who might you be?" "My friends call me Ali," he replied. "I just want to say it's such a pleasure to meet you. I read all the books about you from the Thin Clergyman and his son." Thank you," said Skarloey. He was suddenly taken aback and humbled by this exclamation of praise. "Do I take it you are an enthusiast?" "Yes, I am," agrees Ali. "I've come here on holiday. That's usually my favourite bit of a holiday, seeing steam locomotives about." "Well then, laddie, you've come to the right place," smiled Neil. Ali looked over at him. "I can't believe it!" he exclaimed in awe. "A box tank! 040 and ex-Sodor and mainland too! Are you Neil?" "Why, yes, I am, laddie." Awesome! Mind if I take a photo of you two? By all means, of course, the two engines replied. So Ali took their photo on his phone and showed it to them. They were both suitably impressed. I've seen your twin, you know, Skarloey, said Ali. What, Talyllyn? How is he? Skarloey asked eagerly. Ah, sorry, I'm afraid the thing is I haven't seen him recently. I saw him once when I was a boy. I went to Wales on holiday once with my father, my sister, and one of my dogs. We visited his railway, and he and Dolgok were in steam then. Dolgok took us up the line, and Talyllyn took us home. Aside from that, the only time I saw him was at a model railway exhibition like this one, when he was sent away to be mended. I hear he's on overhaul again. It's a shame, really. This year marks 70 years since his line was preserved, and they have a big celebration for the Finn clergyman's books planned too. Ah, well, I'm sorry to hear that, Skarloey said mournfully. Aye, well, 'tis better than being scrapped at least, comforted Neil. He's been overhauled. No doubt he'll be running again soon. Aye, I suppose so, Skarloey said hesitantly. Well, you are both 157 years old, agreed Ali. A good overhaul would do you both good. Ho, indeed, chuckled Skarloey. He paused for a moment. 157, he said quietly to himself. He looked over at Neil. We've seen sometimes, haven't we, old friend? Aye, that we have, agreed Neil sagely. Skarloey looked around him at the model exhibits. It's funny, he remarked to himself, how many of these layouts remind me of the old days. Quite a few things happened then, before these newfangled inventions came about, like automatic brakes, if you'd like to hear about it. Yes, please, said Ali. Very well, then, said Skarloey. Let's see what there is. He saw a layout of a small railway line passing a field of sheep, as a replica of Sir Handel puffed by. The sheep appeared to be jumping a fence and heading towards the line. That layout there, for instance, he said, gazing at it. Ali followed his gaze. That? But that just looks like the time Sir Handel had that trouble with sheep, he retorted. Look again, laddie, said Neil. Ali did so, and sure enough, another model, this time of Skarloey, puffed past with a train of loaded slate wagons. It reminds me of the first time I took some trucks, grinned Skarloey. And what happened? Grinned Neil. Skarloey blushed. Please tell me about it, said Ali. Skarloey forgot he was slightly embarrassed and began his story. It happened shortly after I first arrived. Mr. Mac had brought Mr. Bobby to be my driver, and we made a grand pair. But unfortunately, a few days after then, Mr. Bobby had fallen ill, and a new driver had been found to cover him. I had only run up the line and back for a few test runs to help me and Mr. Bobby learn the line before all of this, and so I had never handled trucks before. Oh, not that I wanted to anyway. I still wanted coaches. Oh, but after spending some time in that tarpaulin, I decided that it would be best I did what work I was given to be really useful. Especially while we were still upgrading the line for passenger traffic. Otherwise, I'd spend all my time covered up, with no one to see me. Yet I wished Mr. Bobby would come back soon. This new driver was nothing short of reckless and careless. Indeed, I was most relieved to hear that he was getting better and would soon be able to return. I was down at the wharf one day, being steamed up by the new driver, when I saw Neil puff in with some trucks. Poor Neil was feeling tired that day. The trucks had slipped their brakes on accidentally on purpose, and he was having trouble starting them. Having a spot to bother, Neil? I teased. Aye, Neil grimaced. Them trucks are at it again. Have us a plenty and me of a timetable to keep. Well, it's lucky my trucks give me no trouble. I laughed. Oh, Neil did not like that, I tell you. Will you take my warning, Skarloey? He replied. Trucks are nasty little monsters. They'll get you have us soon enough. But I didn't listen though, and as soon as my new driver came back, we went up the line to the quarry with our empty trucks. Back then, I had no cab, which meant I bounced around a lot. I didn't know why then, but it was because no cab meant I was unbalanced, and my front weighed more than my back. My driver didn't like that, I can tell you. Stop your bouncing, you useless thing, he seethed. I can't help it, I replied. You should stop being so rough in my controls. Oh, I can't tell you how mad we were at each other then, nor how loud our insults between each other became. But I can tell you this, people heard the things we said to each other, and they weren't very polite either. Soon we arrived at the slate quarry. We shunted the empties away, and moved across to the sidings to fetch the loaded ones. The trucks were feeling bored that day, and when they saw us, they began their jokes. Oh, look, lads, called one. It's Skarloey, come to grace us with his presence at last. What shall we do, fellas? Said another. Shall we lay out the red carpet for him? No chance. A carpet's not good enough for His Royal Highness, jeered a third. Let's lay out a tarpaulin, cackled the fourth. Or better yet, let's cover him with it so he doesn't have to bestow his eyes upon the likes of lonely trucks like us. The teasing continued as my driver went into the foreman's office to fetch our orders. Eventually, the trucks began to sing. Oh, the grand old engine of Wales, the poor as he's not keen. He worked inside so they covered him up and kept him nice and clean. That's enough out of you, I said. But the trucks just laughed and continued. And when his thing's up, it's up. And when it's down, it's down. And when he doesn't start right up, then it's neither up nor down. I'm sure they would have carried on, but just then my driver returned, and my attention turned to him. Right, he said. We're to take this lot down to the wharf, and I want no bouncing. Only if you don't handle me so roughly, I argued. I'll handle you however I like, the driver protested, and as if to prove his point, he drove me back towards the truck so sharply that I ended up bumping them hard. Ow, 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 they screamed. Then the driver jumped down from my footplate and coupled me up to the trucks. He was in a flaming temper, you see, and began cursing the fact that he decided to work on the railway. He would, it appeared, be happier working as a postman. I wouldn't have given him much of a chance to do that though, going by the way he spoke to me and the trucks. Anyway, we set off. In those days we had no guards vans, as the trucks were rolled up by pack horses and used to be sent down by gravity. But when I arrived, the railway still didn't have any guards vans. They still had yet to understand how to treat us engines properly, you see, and some still felt trucks were best sent down by gravity. But the loads on that particular day were too heavy to go down safely by gravity. Because I was already at the quarry with the empty trucks, it had been decided that I should take the loaded ones down again myself. Remember, came a voice, set the brakes on at Crosneycuren and pilot it down from there. But I didn't listen, and nor did my driver. We were both far too angry at each other. You see, the line between Quorvansgate and Crosneycuren is on a sharp gradient that levels out about a mile or so before the latter. We had to stop at Crosneycuren to check the brakes on the trucks, or else we'd be coming into the wharf as a runaway. The station there also had a loop, whereas the wharf was just nothing but sidings and a shed. so we needed to run around the train there to avoid being trapped behind the trucks while they were being unloaded, in order for us to be ready to take the next scheduled train, and so that I could access the water tower easily. My tanks would be running low by the time we got there, you understand. Well, we arrived at Cosnikern, and the driver stopped us to set the points. Oh, he left my brakes on, but not the trucks. As soon as he had uncoupled me from them, he just drove me forward and set the points. The driver just wanted to finish the job and get home as soon as possible, and so decided to rush his work. But rushing your jobs always leads to some kind of trouble, and so you can imagine my surprise when, as I was backing down the loop, I saw the trucks move past me in the opposite direction. Hurrah! Hurrah! They laughed. We're rolling away! We're rolling away! We're rolling away! You stupid great idiot! I seethed at my driver. Now look what you've done! It wasn't my fault, argued the driver as he ran towards the points and set them. It was those stupid trucks! Just shut up and get driving! I snapped. And so we set off in hot pursuit. I tried my hardest to keep up with the trucks, but they were always just almost out of reach. Can't catch us! Can't catch us! They jeered, but I was determined to do so. At the wharf, there was a siding that went straight forwards, ending opposite the standard gauge line. It was one of those where we wanted the trucks to be unloaded and our loads to be transferred to the big railway. Because no one knew the trucks had run away, the points were still set towards it. Everyone heard me whistle a warning and looked to where the commotion was coming from. They saw the trucks come running into the wharf out of control. Ashanta tried to run towards the points to change them, but the trucks had already crossed them when he got there. They surged right through the buffers, leaped up the wharf, and landed with a crash in a pile on the standard gauge line, right in the path of an approaching Neil. It was lucky he wasn't going fast, or he would never have stopped in time. I soon arrived out of breath and was shocked at the mess. Every single one of the trucks had been smashed to bits. Mr. Mac had been in his office when it happened and stormed out. He soon heard everything. A whole morning's worth of traffic delayed, valuable slate lost, warnings ignored. Words cannot begin to describe how disappointed I am in you, Skarloey. I'm very sorry, sir, I said. We must now pay the Sodor Mainland Railway for the damage to their track, purchase some more trucks, and arrange for an extra load from the quarry. Our customers will now have to wait longer before their deliveries arrive. I have heard about everything you and your driver have done, Skarloey, and I am now beginning to seriously regret purchasing you for our railway. Please, sir, I'll help clean up the mess, I said. I really did feel very sorry for what I had done, and he could see that I truly wanted to make up for it. Very well, you may do so, Mr. Mac said. But mark my words, Skarloey, one more mishap like that, he rapped, gesturing to the wreckage, and you will be taken out of service. He turned his attention to my driver. As for you, he said, my office, now! The driver, looking very shamefaced, followed him back to the office. After they had entered it, several loud voices could be heard coming from it. A boy had been sent to fetch Mr. Bobby round, to operate me for the rest of the day. There was no one else available to drive me without being trained to do so, for they had not placed any advertisements for new drivers. In any case, I was glad to be reunited with my old driver again. Mr. Bobby and I soon had the mess cleared up. Neil helped too, by transporting the remains of the trucks away for scrap, and the broken slate to be disposed of in an incinerator. But throughout it all, he couldn't help but chuckle as we worked. "No trouble, eh?" he would say. "Trucks running down the line and landing here like a jumping sheep. Aye, lad, 'tis nae havers you have here. 'Tis one big messer." but Mr. Bobby took a more serious view of the events, and as we filled up on water, he too spoke to me. "You're very lucky that no one was hurt, Skarloey," he scolded. "Accidents like that are very serious, especially on a railway line. You should be grateful that the damage wasn't any worse." "Yes, Mr. Bobby, I am Mr. Bobby," I said. "If you want to convince Mr. Mac to let you stay on this railway," Mr. Bobby warned, "you must be on your best behaviour. Or else—" He looked at me and winked. "We don't want any more trucks trying to act like jumping sheep." He didn't need to say any more. Instead, he turned on his heels and walked away, chuckling to himself as he went. Over the next few days, I worked as hard as I could and kept on my best behaviour. Indeed, Mr. Mac kept me on, and when Rheneas and the inspector arrived, myself and Mr. Bobby had managed to make up for lost time and had completed the line. But I don't think I need to say how much more careful I was with trucks ever since that day. Skarloey chuckled as he finished his story. "But what about the driver?" asked Ali. "What happened to him?" "Oh, he was sacked right away," replied Skarloey. "Last I heard, he got another job working on the Sodor and Mainland Railway as a shunter at Kailsthorpe. Aye, and a right muckle job he made of it," Neil added grimly. "Their train left our time whilst they was arranging it. He left soon after, though, for a job at a factory in Barrow, so we never saw him again." "That makes sense," said Ali simply. "Still, it just goes to show that you should never rush your work, and must always exercise the greatest of care," Skarloey finished. "Quite so," agreed Ali, grinning.